She dropped her laughter like it burned her tongue. Her fingers, curled mid-gesture, trembled just slightly before they retreated to her lap. Her eyes locked on someone, across the café. The table that had moments earlier been full of animated chatter fell into a bubble of confused silence. Her friends turned to follow her gaze, not understanding. But I understood. She didn't expect to see me. She certainly didn't expect me to be the one sitting there, quietly, by the window with nothing but a chipped ceramic cup and an old leather-bound notebook. I hadn't planned it either. I had walked into that coffee shop because of the rain, not fate. But fate has teeth. 9 years. That's how long it had been since she vanished from my life like smoke. 9 years of unanswered letters, redirected bills, awkward holidays, and trying not to say her name out loud in case it shattered something inside me. She hadn't said goodbye. Not in the way people are supposed to. One morning she just evaporated. Gone before the toast popped. She used to love this place. Back then it had different owners and a mismatched sofa in the corner that always smelled like cinnamon and regret. I never thought she'd come back. But there she was, laughing like betrayal had an expiration date. Until she saw me. Everything about her froze. Her lips parted just slightly. Her coat was still damp from the drizzle outside, but suddenly she looked like she was standing under a spotlight. She wasn't prepared. And neither was I. I didn't wave. Didn't smirk. I didn't do any of the things I used to fantasize about doing if I ever saw her again. No confrontational glare. No calculated exit. I just sat. Because when a ghost walks into the same room as you, your first instinct isn't to scream, it's to disbelieve. And then she stood up. Slowly, without a word to her friends, without touching her untouched coffee. The legs of her chair scraped back against the wood floor, the sound oddly sharp in the stillness. She walked toward me like a sleepwalker, unblinking, unsure if what she was seeing was real. I didn't breathe. She stopped a few feet away. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She glanced at my notebook, recognizing it. She bought it for me once, back when she used to say things like, "You should write something beautiful someday." That was before she rewrote everything we had into a story I wasn't allowed to finish. And then, without a single greeting or a trace of that artificial smile I always hated, she said 4 words I'll never forget. "I thought you died." The table behind us erupted in a burst of laughter, unrelated, detached, but it hit like a cruel contrast. She said she thought I was dead. I couldn't tell if she meant it as relief or regret. I wanted to respond. I wanted to ask her why she disappeared, why she took the money, why she left behind the version of me who actually believed she was my future. But before I could speak, her phone lit up on the table she'd left behind. And what I saw made my stomach twist. The name flashing on the screen wasn't unfamiliar. It was mine, but not my number, not my phone, just my name. I couldn't make sense of it. Her hand hovered near the glowing screen like she was afraid to touch it, as if the device itself might explode. The name on the screen, my name, kept blinking in bold white letters over a backdrop photo of the two of us from years ago. A picture I hadn't seen since the night she deleted every trace of our shared life from her social media and left town without a word. My face. Her face. Her phone. My name. She didn't pick it up. She didn't explain. She just slowly reached over, turned it face down, and whispered, "I'll explain. Just not here." But I didn't move. I couldn't. That same feeling was back, like watching a train coming straight at you, and you can't decide whether to run or stay and finally let it hit. She stood across from me, barely holding it together, but there was something different now. Something fractured behind her polished exterior. The Mavis I remembered was cold when she left me, calculated even. But this version, she looked almost hunted. I glanced at her friends, still seated, unsure what was going on but too polite to intrude. One of them, dark-haired, sharper eyes, watched me carefully, like she was piecing things together. Like she already knew who I was. Mavis leaned down closer, her voice a notch above breath. "Elliot, if you want the truth, meet me tonight. 9 o'clock. The place with the yellow door." The place with the yellow door. That was a reference only we knew. It wasn't a restaurant or bar. It was the old greenhouse in the yard of her grandmother's abandoned property on the edge of town. We used to sneak there in our 20s when we were too broke to go anywhere else. The door was hideous. Bright yellow, cracked paint, half-inched. But it became our place. A place for secrets, stupid dreams, long kisses, and once, a proposal that I never realized meant more to me than it ever did to her. Before I could reply, she turned and walked out. No coffee. No goodbye to her friends. No explanation. I was left with the ghost of a moment and a dozen questions detonating in my chest. I sat there long after she left, watching raindrops gather and slide down the window. The barista gave me strange looks. I must have looked pale, hollowed out. I was. I felt like someone had reached inside me and jumbled the past, present, and future all in one chaotic mess. Why was my name on her phone under someone else's contact? Why did she think I was dead? And most of all, why had she come back? That evening, I tried not to go. I paced the floor of my apartment for nearly an hour, picking up my coat and putting it back down a dozen times. I hated how much power she still had over me. I hated that she could drop a single phrase, the place with the yellow door, and suddenly I was 16 again, smitten and stupid. At 8:37 p.m., I gave in. I drove there slowly, with the kind of dread you only feel in dreams. The greenhouse hadn't changed much. The path was muddy from the rain, and the yellow door looked like it could fall off with a sneeze. The property was half overgrown, wildflowers choking the fence. I stepped inside, expecting dust, maybe mice, definitely regret. Instead, I found a single lantern flickering on the old workbench. And beside it, her phone, the same one from earlier. But no Mavis. I waited. For minutes. Then half an hour. Then an hour. Nothing. Until the lantern flickered again. Not because it was running out of battery, but because someone had just stepped behind me. And when I turned around, it wasn't Mavis. I turned slowly, my fingers tightening into fists before I even saw who it was. The shape in the dark wasn't Mavis, taller, broader shoulders, someone I didn't recognize. He stepped forward just enough for the lantern's glow to catch the edge of his face. Mid-30s maybe, wearing a navy coat, damp at the collar from the rain. His expression was flat, unreadable, not hostile, just cold. "Elliot?" he asked, voice low, as if checking something off a mental list. I nodded, pulse in my throat. He pulled something from his pocket, casual, no rush, and held it out to me. An envelope. My name was written on it in her handwriting. That unmistakable leftward slant, a little flourish on the capital E. My chest tightened before I even touched it. "She said if you came, to give you this. And to tell you not to follow her," he said. "She also said you'd understand why once you read it." I took the envelope, but I didn't open it. "Not yet." "Who are you?" He gave a faint smile, tired, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Just someone trying to help her fix something she broke a long time ago." "Where is she?" "Gone," he replied. "Not far." "Not yet. But if you chase her now, it'll only get worse. For both of you." He turned and walked back into the shadows before I could form a reply. His footsteps faded fast, as if he'd practiced disappearing. I was left standing there in that damp greenhouse, holding a letter that felt heavier than any words inside it could justify. The silence returned, thick and humming with old memories. I finally tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no greeting, no signature. Just one line, written in her precise, anxious cursive. I didn't vanish. I was erased. I read it 5 times. I didn't vanish. I was erased. What did that even mean? I turned the paper over. Nothing. Just that sentence, scrawled like a warning or a confession. I sat on the workbench, the same one we used to climb up on during long summer nights, and stared at the walls. Everything about the place felt like a faded postcard from a version of life I'd never get back. I thought about leaving, about burning the letter, about ignoring whatever game this was. But I couldn't. She had always been dramatic, but never cryptic. This was something else. There was panic between the lines. Desperation. I drove home with the letter on the passenger seat, glancing at it every stoplight like it might spontaneously offer more answers. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch in the dark, playing and replaying the cafe moment, the greenhouse, the man's face, the note. And then, at 3:14 a.m., my landline rang. Yes, landline. I only kept it because it came with the apartment and nobody ever called it. I picked it up. Silence. Then, after a few static pops, "Did he give you the message?" Her voice. I sat upright. "Where are you?" "No names," she said. "No details. Just listen. There's a man who's pretending to be you. He's been in this town. He's been using your name, your story. And I didn't know how deep it went until I came back." My stomach flipped. "What are you talking about?" "What man?" "I don't know who he really is, but he has your old documents, your handwriting. He's been contacting people, people from your past, people from mine, and they all think it's you, Elliot." I pressed the phone harder to my ear. Why would anyone do that? I'm still trying to figure that out. But someone doesn't want you to be found or remembered. You need to stay away from public places, especially that cafe. You shouldn't have been there. I wanted to ask 100 things, but she interrupted sharply. They're watching me now. I can't call again. Wait, Mavis. Click. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver in my hand for a long time. And then I noticed something outside my window. A dark figure across the street. Still, watching. I didn't move at first. I just sat there in the dark, breathing too loudly, my hand still gripping the phone like it could bring her back if I held it tight enough. Across the street, beneath the dim flicker of the street lamp, the figure stood completely still. No umbrella. No phone. No sign of purpose. Just watching. It wasn't like spotting a person waiting for an Uber or someone walking a dog. This felt deliberate. The kind of stare you feel before you ever look out the window. I let the blinds fall shut and backed into the living room. My knees bumped the coffee table. I cursed under my breath. My building was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies everything. Your heartbeat, your footsteps, even the soft creak of doubt settling into your chest. I turned off every light. I watched from the kitchen through the edge of the curtain. The figure didn't move for a solid 5 minutes. Then, as if given a silent cue, he turned and walked slowly down the block until he vanished into the dark. I didn't sleep. Not a second. I sat at my kitchen table with the letter from the greenhouse spread out in front of me and a knife in my lap like it made any difference. I even Googled identity fraud local, false aliases, how to erase someone legally, and at one point, am I losing my mind? The results weren't helpful. By morning, the only decision I had made was that I wasn't going to sit around and let this unravel on its own. I needed answers. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, Mavis was the only threat I had. I needed to find her, or at least someone who could lead me back to her. I remembered her friends from the cafe, especially the dark-haired one. The way she looked at me wasn't just confusion. It was recognition, like she knew who I was, but also knew something more. I returned to the cafe at noon the next day, this time walking in like I belonged there. No corner seat, no tea. I asked the girl at the counter if she'd seen Mavis's friends again. She gave me a cautious look and said, "You were here yesterday, right?" I nodded. "She left this for you." She reached under the register and pulled out a napkin. On it was a name, Raya Doran, and a number. I didn't recognize either. No explanation, no from Mavis. Just a name that sounded vaguely familiar, like something I'd seen in an old journal entry or a forgotten invitation. I called the number outside, pacing under the trees. It rang 5 times, then picked up. "Elliot," a female voice said, and I froze. Yeah, this is. I don't have much time. I shouldn't even be on this line. But I was told you're starting to remember." "Remember what?" I asked. "The man pretending to be you? He's been doing it for longer than you think. You weren't just erased, Elliot. You were replaced. Slowly. Intentionally. People from your past, colleagues, old friends, even family, they've been approached. By him. Using your name, your stories. Convincing them you were just not yourself anymore. That's why they stopped calling." My throat dried up. Why would anyone go through that kind of effort? There was a long silence. Because of what you knew, or what you were about to find out. Back then, before Mavis left, you were getting too close. Too close to what? That's not something I can tell you over the phone. You're not giving me anything to go on. Meet me tonight. 10 p.m. North Lock Storage. Unit 47. Come alone. And Elliot, bring the letter she gave you. Click. Again. No time to respond. No chance to push back. Just another voice vanishing into the static while I stood there in the middle of town with a note in my pocket and a growing suspicion that my life had been tampered with in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. The rest of the day was a blur. I dug through old boxes, trying to piece together any clues that might explain what Raya meant. But every time I thought I'd found something, a missing photo, a disconnected number, a bank statement from a closed account, it only led to more confusion. It was as if someone had spent years carefully pruning pieces of me away without me noticing. By 9:45 p.m., I was parked outside North Lock Storage, watching the condensation climb the inside of my windshield. I could see Unit 47 from where I sat. The light above it was out, and the only sound was the faint buzzing of an old security camera rotating on its mount. At 9:59, I stepped out and walked toward the unit. At exactly 10 o'clock, the metal door creaked open from the inside. But what I found in that unit wasn't Raya. It was something far worse. something that shouldn't have existed. There was no light inside the unit, only the faint spill of moonlight from the crack in the steel door behind me. I stepped in cautiously, heart pounding in my ears, the sound of my shoes against the concrete echoing just slightly in the stale, closed space. I called out, "Raya," but the only response was a cold draft brushing past me like breath from something sleeping. The air smelled like dust, rust, and something else chemical, sterile. I reached for my phone to use its flashlight, and the moment I flicked it on, I stopped breathing. There were photos taped to the walls. Hundreds of them. Me. At work. Walking through town. Leaving my apartment. Some looked recent. Others, years old. In one, I was standing outside a gas station I hadn't been to since 2018. In another, I was inside a restaurant that had closed down before the pandemic. In each picture, I looked the same. Same jacket. Same posture. Same awkward slouch. But I had no memory of being there. None. Zero. And worse, there were duplicates. In 2 photos, I stood in the same place, same time, same background. But my facial expression was different. In one, I looked bored. In the other, I was smiling. Like someone had reenacted my life, moment by moment, and wasn't always getting the emotions quite right. I backed away, trying to slow my thoughts, and that's when I heard the voice. "You shouldn't be here alone." I spun around, the light slicing across the corner. Raya stepped into view. Thin, short cropped hair. Jacket zipped high, one hand holding a file folder, the other shoved deep in her pocket. Her face was tight with exhaustion, like she hadn't slept for weeks. Maybe longer. "I came because you said," I started. "I didn't say come inside the unit," she snapped quietly. "This place is compromised. Always has been." My head was spinning. What is this? Who's taking these photos of me? Why are there doubles? She moved quickly, peeling one photo from the wall and handing it to me. "That's not you." I stared at it. It was me. "No," she repeated. "That's the version of you someone created. Trained. Sent to replace you. The photos are part of a timeline, tracking what you did, how you moved, how you spoke. The more data they had, the easier it was to overwrite your presence. Piece by piece." "That's insane," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "This sounds like some sci-fi nightmare. This doesn't happen in real life." She looked me dead in the eye. "Then why did your mother send you a birthday card 2 years ago addressed to a man who no longer lives at your apartment? Why do all your credit records stop cold in 2016 and resume under a slightly different middle name? Why did your old boss say you visited him just 6 months ago with a new phone number and a new wife?" I tried to speak but couldn't. My hands were shaking. I could feel it in my knees too, like the floor itself was about to give way. Raya handed me the folder she'd been holding. "This has details about Project Duress. It started as an experiment in post-identity repurposing. They took people who vanished, runaways, burnouts, the terminally ill, and modeled them into existing public identities that were easy to delete. Men like you, Elliot. Quiet. Unnoticed. Low noise." "I'm not unnoticed," I whispered, more to myself than her. "You are now." She reached into her pocket again and pulled out a plastic keycard. "This is to a motel on the edge of town. Room 19. Mavis left something there for you. She thought you'd come looking eventually. And she was right. But you need to be careful. You're not just being watched anymore. You're being followed." "By who?" She looked over her shoulder toward the open door. "By the version of you who's been living the life you forgot you ever had." I left the unit in a daze, heart thudding with every step. Outside, the night air was colder than I expected. I fumbled with my keys, got into the car, and just sat there for a minute, watching my breath fog up the windshield. Who was I, really? Who had I been replaced by? And most terrifying of all, what if that other version of me didn't want to give my life back? I didn't drive straight to the motel. I circled the block. Twice. I kept checking the rearview mirror, scanning for taillights that followed every turn. The paranoia wasn't just in my mind anymore. It was real, and it had been building behind my back for years. I finally pulled into the gravel lot behind a peeling red building labeled Delway Motor Inn. Room 19 was around the side. A single dim porch bulb flickered overhead, and the silence was so dense it rang in my ears. I used the keycard. Inside, the room was almost empty, just a bed, a chair, a small TV, and a folded envelope on the desk. My name again. I picked it up, hesitating before opening it. The seal had been broken already. Inside was a photograph. Me and Mavis. Not from the past. Not from the café. From last week. Standing beside a car I didn't recognize. smiling like strangers do when they pose for someone else's memory. And I realized, this wasn't a warning. It was a message. Someone else had been wearing my skin, and they weren't finished. I stared at the photo so long my eyes started to blur. I wanted to believe it was edited, staged, some kind of trick, but there was no denying it. The image was recent. The timestamp printed faintly on the back confirmed it, for days ago. And in the photo, standing beside that unfamiliar black SUV with silver rims, was me. Same face. Same slouch. Same tiny scar above the right eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at 13. But it wasn't me. Not really. Because I had no memory of being there. No memory of that car, or the striped shirt I was wearing in the image, or the casual way I rested my hand on Mavis's lower back like we'd never skipped a beat. It was more than disturbing. It was invasive. Someone had taken my likeness, my mannerisms, and constructed something so convincing that Mavis had stood next to it, smiling, like they were a couple. Like I had never left. I pressed the photo to my chest, like that could somehow contain the boiling panic trying to claw its way up my throat. The motel room was silent except for the low buzz of the ceiling light and the ticking from a wall clock whose hands didn't seem to move. I scanned the room for anything else, desperate for context, anything. There was a cheap duffel bag beneath the desk. Inside were several items, a burner phone, a small USB drive, and a folded receipt from a grocery store 2 towns over. I recognized the name on the receipt. It was signed E. Dorson. My name. Except not quite. The receipt was from the same day the photo was taken. I booted up the motel TV, not because I expected anything useful but because silence felt dangerous now. Static flickered before a local news anchor's voice filled the room. I sat on the bed with the USB drive clenched in my hand, thinking, what am I supposed to do with this? Who would even believe me? I plugged the drive into my laptop and braced myself. There were only 2 files. One was a video labeled entry_09-14. The other was a folder called backups_conf_e. I opened the video first. It was grainy surveillance footage from a gas station. The camera angle was slightly tilted, but clear enough to recognize faces. At the timestamped moment, I watched him, the version of me, step out of that black SUV, walk into the store, and chat casually with the cashier. He bought a bottled water, a scratch ticket, and gum. Then he walked back out, looking relaxed, unhurried, alive. The part that made my stomach drop? As he exited, he looked up directly at the camera and smiled. It wasn't just a smile for the camera. It was a smile for me, like he knew I'd eventually find this. I slammed the laptop shut and stood, unsure what to do, who to call, what to believe. The motel room was closing in on me, the ceiling feeling lower than before, the walls breathing louder. I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my reflection. Then I heard it. The soft shuffle of movement behind the door. Not a knock. Not footsteps. A slow, deliberate brushing sound, like fingers across the metal of the door frame. I held my breath, turned off the bathroom light, tiptoed to the window, and gently pushed the curtain aside. No one in sight. But then, just as I turned toward the door again, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. He knows you're here. Leave now. Back exit. Go east. Don't run. Just walk. My hand shook as I grabbed my jacket and shoved the laptop and drive into the duffel bag. I opened the back window. It creaked slightly, a terrible sound in a night like this, and I hoisted myself through, landing behind a stack of garbage bins. I crouched, heart slamming against my ribs, and glanced back. There, in front of room 19, stood the other me. Not moving. Not knocking. Just staring at the door, hands in his coat pockets, as if he had all the time in the world. And the worst part? Even from behind, I could see Mavis standing at the edge of the parking lot, half hidden in the dark, watching him. Not me. Him. I stayed low behind the garbage bins, barely daring to breathe, watching my double stand exactly where I had been moments earlier. He didn't look around. Didn't knock. He just stood at the motel door like a patient shadow, waiting for someone who wasn't going to answer. I couldn't see his face from where I crouched, but I didn't need to. I knew what it looked like. That was the horror of it, I knew. Every angle, every habit, every nuance. The way he tucked his right hand into his pocket but let the left one hang loose. The slight lean of his shoulders when he thought no one was watching. That was my body language. My walk. My skin. And he was wearing it like it belonged to him. I waited until he turned and walked away, slow and casual, heading toward the car parked near the vending machines. He climbed in, Not the black SUV from the photo, but a gray sedan I didn't recognize, and Mavis followed a few seconds later. She slipped into the passenger seat without hesitation, like this was their routine. Like she had chosen him again. Or maybe she never stopped. Once the taillights disappeared down the road, I finally exhaled and crawled out from my hiding spot. I didn't go back into the motel. I didn't trust it anymore. I couldn't trust anything anymore. I walked for nearly an hour down the edge of the highway, hood up, backpack digging into my shoulders, until I found an all-night diner that looked empty enough to disappear inside. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a flickering neon, open sign that had long since given up trying to be inviting. The waitress didn't ask questions. Just refilled my coffee over and over while I sat hunched over my laptop in the corner booth, the USB drive plugged back in, folder open. The second item I hadn't looked at earlier, the one marked backups_conf_e, was filled with audio recordings. Dozens of them, all titled with dates that stretched over the past 2 years. I played the earliest one. At first, I thought it was a voicemail. Then I realized it was a recording of a conversation, one that sounded like it had been captured secretly. A voice, mine, but not mine, spoke clearly. She's starting to remember details I never told her. That's dangerous. Then another voice, deeper, a man I didn't recognize. Stay the course. People forget. That's what they do. The next clip started mid-sentence. Mavis's voice this time, raw and uncertain. I swear, he touches my back the exact same way. But sometimes, I feel like he's waiting for me to notice something wrong. Like I'm being tested. The recordings got more disturbing with each one. Conversations between him and people I hadn't spoken to in years, my high school best friend, an old coworker, even my landlord from 3 apartments ago. It was like he had been auditing my life, covering every base, repairing gaps I didn't know I'd left behind. And the final clip? That's the one that made my stomach turn. A woman's voice. Tired. Flat. I don't care who he was before. The version I have now is better. There was a long silence before the reply came, my voice again. You made the right choice. I yanked the headphones out and nearly threw the laptop across the table. The waitress looked up but didn't say anything. I just sat there, sweating through my shirt, trembling with a fury I couldn't even understand. Somewhere out there, this version of me wasn't just imitating. He was succeeding. He had the job, the friends, Mavis. He had rewritten me so thoroughly that even the people who used to love me now preferred him. And what if that was the point? What if this wasn't a mistake? What if it wasn't some identity theft scheme or government experiment or breakdown of memory? What if this entire thing was a replacement? What if I was the leftover piece that didn't get cleared away? I left the diner just after sunrise, unable to sit still. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked, phone buzzing in my pocket from missed calls from restricted numbers. I ignored them all. The air was damp and strange, and I started to wonder if I even looked real anymore. Did people pass me and wonder if I was the imposter? By noon, I found myself standing in front of a familiar building, the house Mavis and I used to live in. I didn't remember walking there. My feet had done it on their own, dragging me to the one place I knew I didn't belong. But something was wrong. There was a new mailbox, a new car in the driveway, fresh paint, and through the window I saw them. Not just him and Mavis, but a child, a little boy, my nose, her eyes. And the worst part? He looked up, saw me through the glass, and didn't flinch. He smiled, like he recognized me. I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet were glued to the sidewalk as I stared through the window at a life that looked like mine but wasn't. A man with my face, my voice, my rhythm of speech was inside that house, pouring juice into a plastic cup while Mavis laughed at something he said. And the child, that little boy, sat at the kitchen table swinging his feet, perfectly comfortable, perfectly loved. The scene looked like a painting someone had made from my memories and improved the parts one didn't know were broken. And for a sickening second, I thought, maybe I don't belong anywhere anymore. But then the door opened. It wasn't him. It was Mavis. She stepped out slowly, arms folded tightly across her chest. There was no anger in her face, no fear, just weariness, and something else I couldn't place until she came closer. Guilt. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I nodded. I didn't mean to be. She looked back toward the house, then at me again. You saw him? Yes. And the boy? She nodded, eyes glossy. His name is Milo. Is he? I stopped myself. I didn't need a DNA test to know the answer. She didn't flinch. He's yours. That single sentence shattered everything and rewired it all at once. I wanted to scream, cry, grab her, and demand answers. But I didn't. I just stood there, holding back the 1,000 questions that no longer mattered as much as the one that did. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, she said quietly. But you had already disappeared. Or at least, that's what they told me. I searched, Elliot. I looked for you. And when they showed me someone who looked like you, acted like you, when he remembered things you'd forgotten, I started to believe maybe I was wrong. That maybe you'd changed, and maybe this was who you were now. I shook my head, still trying to make sense of the unthinkable. You knew it wasn't really me. Deep down. You had to know. I did, she whispered, her voice cracking. But by then, he was all I had left. There was a silence between us. Long-wounded. Then she stepped forward and pressed something into my palm. A small flash drive. What is this? Everything I collected once I realized the truth. The man inside, he's not real. Not completely. They built him from pieces of you, pieces of others. I kept quiet because of Milo. But you deserve to be seen. To exist. To matter. I didn't know what to say. For so long I had clung to the idea that Mavis had betrayed me, destroyed me. But standing here, watching the tears she didn't bother to hide anymore, I saw it. She wasn't the villain. She was just as lost in this as I was. He thinks I'm him, I said, voice small. No, she replied gently. He thinks he's you. But the real you never had to pretend to love. Or to remember. We stood in silence a moment longer. Then she nodded toward the sidewalk. Come back tomorrow morning. Milo deserves to know you. Really know you. You don't have to stay hidden anymore, Elliot. I felt something loosen in my chest. For the first time in 9 years, I could breathe without second-guessing whether the air was really mine. That night, I checked into a new motel, one no one else had touched. I watched the sun come up with the flash drive in one hand and a pen in the other. I started to write about memory, about identity, about what it means to be forgotten and then found again. The next morning, I walked up that same driveway. Milo opened the door before I could knock. He looked at me for a long second. And then, without a word, he hugged me. Not because he knew me, but because something in him recognized me. And in that moment, I was no longer erased. I was home.